It wasn't my intention to spend the first moments of each video being incredulous about the level of support you've given me in this channel so far, but here we are again. I'm truly thankful, and I'm really excited to already be fully monetized on YouTube on this channel. I'd guessed it might happen by the end of the year, but after less than a month, wowee! Thanks so much for all your support. I really appreciate it. Now, let's get into the video. This week's goal is simple. Run trains on every inch of track present on the layout. The lower loop is already working well, although it does still need some more work to be perfect. So we're going to start out by turning our attention to the upper loop. Like I mentioned in the first two videos on the layout, there's some terrain damage that is currently blocking the right-of-way underneath the coal mine scene, and it is really hard to film back in there, so I hope you can excuse the poor quality sparse footage of this part of the process. There's all sorts of debris here, so I'll hit it with the vacuum in as many places as I can, and then take a look at exactly what's going to need to be removed. Not gonna lie, looking at it from this perspective, it's pretty rough. I'd hoped that I wouldn't need to cut a bunch of the terrain out, but the collapse is completely blocking the right-of-way, and I attempted to shore it up with some scrap foam board, but unfortunately that didn't work, and I had to break out the knife and remove some of the most offending bits since the structure was completely compromised and it just kept sagging onto the area the more I removed. But all of this is going to be okay, because in the long run I am planning on completely redoing this area, and it's just going to have to look ugly for a while. But the most important thing is that it will be free of debris and we'll be able to run trains through here. After vacuuming all that up, running the track cleaning tool over everything back there, and I do mean everything, and then manually verifying all the joints are clear and lined up, it's time to get the track hooked up and verify we have good current delivery. This upper loop had some problems last time I tried to run a train on it, so I'm going to check with the power pack and a multimeter to make sure it's all getting power, and it looks like we should be good to go for now, at least for the time being. So let's get our locomotive on here and give it some juice. And we're off. Like the lower loop, this one could still use a bit more thorough cleaning, but it does work. I'm going to let this run for a few laps and then move on to the next. Now let's turn our attention to the middle of the layout and the switching area there. I spent quite a while when I first got this layout manually tracing as many wires as I possibly could. You saw that in the first video. And it seems the turnout controls are mostly wired up as part of this big bundle of wires, which actually turns out it's a length of scrap telephone system cabling. That tells you how long ago this was built. It has a bunch of individual strands. Now that I actually know what's going on, I have to admire it as a smart way to do some cable management. And right now we don't need to worry about these, as they all go to the turnout control panel on the fascia. What we do need to worry about is the feeder wires for this segment, which would be these two connectors here that I've already identified. I got those hooked up to the power pack off camera, so let's apply some power. Since this area has a lot of turnouts, and I'm willing to bet there could be issues with power delivery, I'm going to test these tracks with the multimeter to make sure all the rails are getting power. Kato Unitrack turnouts are power routing, so I'll need to flip switches back and forth a little bit to get some of these tracks powered up due to how this area is wired. And it looks like everything is getting power even if the current isn't consistent in all the places I measured. I want to see if this switch panel works too, so I'll also hit each of the control buttons on the panel here and see which switch motors fire up. Or I would, but it seems like none of these are working. I know from previous experience that the Kato Unitrack switch motors use DC track current run through a special modular control that snaps right under the side of some of their power packs, but the switches on this layout were instead wired to this nice control panel with a track layout schematic of the switching area. Because of that, we can't investigate the switch wiring without taking the panel off. So you'll see if I remove the panel from the fascia, we get access to the back of all these plunger buttons, and yes, this wiring setup looks complicated at first, but if you examine where everything goes, you can see that each one is wired to track power, as well as a common rail to complete the circuit each time each button is pressed. Now each one of these buttons is for a separate direction on the switch. So you'll see that first rail closer to the camera and then that second rail further away are each wired to one of the buttons for each turnout. Everything is soldered, and while there are some extraneous lengths of bare copper coming off of some connections, it seems like everything is connected, so I'm not exactly sure what the issue here is. I can't find current with my multimeter even with the power pack set to maximum voltage, so for today at least, we won't be able to use the electric points. The good news though, is that these turnouts, like most, do have a small tab that I can use to manually operate and still use the layout while I figure out what in the world is going on with the switch wiring. So let's do exactly that. Let's run our locomotive through all the turnouts, flip the switches back and forth a bit, and just get some use out of this area for the first time in a long while. I cleaned up the track some both last week and today, and the operation will improve as the rails continue to get some use, but for now, this is working decently well. I'd love to do some proper switching and take advantage of the magnetic uncouplers this layout has, but the freight cars and locomotive that came with the Kato starter set don't have coupler trip pins installed yet, and I'm also deeply unconvinced that the couplers themselves are any good, at least compared to microchains couplers. And I don't have any of those at the moment to replace them with, so for right now, we're just going to have to settle for running a couple of cars back and forth without actual switching. But even this is great fun, after not being able to operate very much when I first got this layout home. So what's next? Obviously, I'd love to get these switch motors working, but I'm not sure how to proceed from here. If you have any advice, ideas, or theories, I'd love to hear them. I did ask the shop owner about them several times, but he said that the gentleman who did the wiring on this layout all those years ago has sadly passed away and did not leave any notes about how this was set up. I suppose I could just rip all the wires out and redo them, but I'd really like to make the existing setup work if possible. Outside of that, I obviously need to fix all that's wrong with the terrain near the coal mine, and that will probably be multiple videos all in its own. And I have some pretty fun stuff in the works for next week's layout video, and something really exciting for the week after that. But for now, that's all I've got. Thanks so much for watching and for all the amazing support on this channel and these layout videos so far. I'll see you next week.